Tony and Marzana at 151 Randolph Road, hey. We know you've been thinking about maybe downsizing, right, in the next few months or maybe a year or two down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's exactly what we wanted to dig into today. What do the latest market numbers look like for detached homes right there in South Leaside? So consider this like your personalized breakdown of the March 2025 real estate picture. We're looking at two main reports here: the Leaside Market Report, March 2025, and the March 2025 Market Update, South Leaside Detached Homes.
Right, right.
Plus, we'll be pulling in those smart insights Kaylee and Brad shared with you earlier, too.
Makes sense.
Now, we can't ignore that big economic picture, of course,
Yeah.
so we'll be weaving that in as we go, ready to jump in.
Let's do it. Give Tony and Razana that clear, focused view of what it all means, especially as they think about their next move.
You got it. So let's start right in your neighborhood, Tony and Marzana. Leaside in early 2025. The Leaside Market Report gave us those January numbers, and it looks like 3 detached homes sold, averaging around $2,480,000. But here's the thing. The report calls this a notable increase compared to last year at the same time. Sounds pretty good for the detached market there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that notable increase year over year definitely jumps out, Even though it's just 1 month's data, it kind of hints that the demand for detached homes in Leaside is still pretty strong.
Totally. And then there was that sale on Bennington Heights Drive, $3,295,000.
Oh, yeah, that one. That high-end sale on Bennington Heights really shows that the upper end of the market is still hopping.
Now let's zoom out a bit. That same report looked at the whole year leading up to January 2025.
Okay.
The average detached home price in Leaside went up, but just a little 2.3% year over year to $2,714,771. And in early February, there were 16 homes for sale in Leaside. So there's activity, but what's the overall vibe? What does it tell us, especially for homeowners like Tony and Marzama?
Well, thinking about your home specifically, that 2.3% increase over a year, it shows a slow and steady rise in value. Not a crazy jump, but consistent.
Makes sense.
And only 16 listings in early February. Maybe the supply was an overwhelming demand? That could be good news for you down the line. When you're ready to list 151 Randolph, there might still be a lot of interest from buyers who want a place in that neighborhood.
Okay, now let's pull back and look at the GTA.
The bigger picture.
Exactly. Leaside is part of that, right? The report talks about a cautious start to 2025 in the GTA during January. Sales were way down, almost at a 20-year low. Houses were down 9% and condos down 11% compared to the year before. Sounds like things cooled down quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely some caution there. Probably a bunch of things going on. The whole economic climate, maybe people taking a little longer to jump into big decisions. But for your detached home, it's really interesting that the condo market took a steeper dive. We'll see that difference pop up again later.
Gotcha. And it looks like February didn't exactly set the market on fire either. Sales across the whole GTA were down another 27.4% year over year. Slowdown doesn't seem to be letting up, does it?
Nope, it's pretty consistent. That drop in sales, hitting both houses and condos, really points to things cooling down. And when fewer properties are selling, that usually means more choices for buyers, more inventory. And guess what? That's exactly what the report says happened.
You're right, inventory. The report actually uses the word surge, especially for condos.
I saw that. Crazy, right?
It's wild. January condo listings were at an all-time high, twice the usual amount. Even houses jumped up 59% year over year in January. That's a lot more properties on the market all of a sudden. What does that mean for Tony and Marzana thinking about selling their detached home?
Well, think about all those condos flooding the market. That's a lot of options for buyers. It might mean they're taking their time, even when they're looking at a great area like South Leaside.
Okay, interesting.
But, the 59% increase in house listings is big, sure, but not as extreme as the condos. Still, more choices for buyers out there.
And all those extra listings seem to have nudged prices a bit. In January, the average house price in the GTA went up just a tiny bit, 1% year over year to $1,270,000. But condo prices dipped a little, down 1% to $699,000.
Right.
February saw the overall average selling price go down 2.2% year over year to $1,080,000. And the MLS HPI benchmark was down 1.8% year over year. So it's a mixed bag, but prices are softening a bit, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. That little bump in house prices in January could be because of the types of houses that sold,
Which makes sense.
But the HPI benchmark, that's the steady one. And it shows that by February, prices were going down a bit. And remember that condo market with all the new listings, the price drop there lines up perfectly. And this difference between how house and condo prices are acting, that's super important to keep in mind for your detached home in Leaside.
Right, so that's the big picture in the GTA. Now let's really focus on South Leaside. Time to break out the March 2025 market update. It starts off by saying that overall GTA sales in March were down 23.1% year over year, but new listings were up, way up, 28.6%. So more choices for buyers across the board.
Yep, same story we saw in the earlier report. All those new listings popping up. That gives buyers lots to look at, and it can push prices down a bit. Maybe give buyers some wiggle room to negotiate.
Now, specifically for detached homes in Toronto, the 416 area, the average price in March was 1,723,489. That's up 1.1% compared to March 2024. So even with fewer sales overall, it seems like detached homes within the city are doing okay.
Yeah, that's important for you, Tony and Rosanna. While sales are down in the GTA overall, detached home prices in the city, they're actually ticking up a bit. It shows there's still a good appetite for those properties in desirable spots, and South Leaside definitely fits that bill.
Absolutely. And speaking of your neighborhood, the average detached home selling price in Toronto Central, which includes South Leaside, was $2,400,804 in March 2025. That's a strong number for your area. But here's the thing. The MLS HPI benchmark price for detached homes in Toronto Central was $1,642,700, and that's actually down 3.4% year over year. Can you break down what that means for someone thinking about selling in South Leaside?
Sure thing. Think of it this way. The average selling price, that's just all the detached home sale prices in Toronto Central during March, added up and then divided by the number of homes sold.
Yeah.
But that number can change depending on the specific homes that sold that month. Like if a bunch of really expensive or big homes sold in March, that would push the average price up, right?
Yeah.
Now, the MLS HPI benchmark price is like tracking a typical home. It looks at a bunch of factors and gives you a more steady view of how prices are really moving. So even though the average selling price in your area is high, which means people still want to live there, the benchmark price says that the value of a more standard detached home has dropped a bit compared to last year. It means things might not be skyrocketing like before, and it shows how important it is to price your home right based on its features and what's happening with those benchmark prices.
Makes sense. So while people are paying good money for homes in your area, the benchmark suggests things aren't going up as fast as they used to. Now, the report also talks about detached home sales in Toronto. They were down 28.9% year over year in the 416 area, with 173 sales happening in Toronto Central. So fewer homes are selling, but there's still action in your local market.
You got it. That lower sales volume in Toronto Central matches the overall trend in the GTA, but 173 homes still sold. That means there are buyers out there looking in South Leaside, but things have slowed down a bit compared to last year.
And how fast are homes selling? Across the GTA, it's taking a little longer, 24 days on the market versus 20 last year. But here's the interesting part for you, Tony and Mirzana. Detached homes in Toronto Central were actually selling pretty quickly in March, just 29 days on average. So when a great property like yours in South Leaside comes up for sale, it's probably going to move pretty fast.
Got it. The GTA overall is taking longer to sell, but in Toronto Central, those homes are moving. It shows how much people want to live in places like South Leaside. When they find the right place, they're ready to make a move.
Okay, let's talk affordability and the economy. The report says it's gotten a little easier to buy a home thanks to lower borrowing costs and some adjustments to overall home prices. That's got to be good news for buyers in your area, right?
Definitely. After those big interest rate hikes we've seen, any break on borrowing costs makes a difference. Plus, with some prices adjusting, it might be a little easier for buyers to get into places like South Leaside.
Right. Speaking of interest rates, the Bank of Canada made a move in March 2025. They cut their key rate by a quarter of a percentage point, down to 2.75%. Then the prime rate dropped to 5.0% in March, and it looks like more rate cuts might be coming. Fixed mortgage rates for those typical 3 and 5 year terms are around 6.5% right now, so borrowing money is getting a bit cheaper.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That rate cut from the Bank of Canada and the prime rate dropping means lower costs for people with variable rate mortgages, and it affects fixed rates too. And the talk of more rate cuts, that could definitely get buyers more excited in the coming months, which is good news for sellers in places like South Leaside.
But it's not all sunshine and roses on the economic front. Inflation is creeping up a bit, could hit 2.6% for March compared to 1.9% in February, and the unemployment rate in Toronto was 8.6% in early March and April 2025. Plus, we've got those tariff uncertainties hanging over everything. Those things could affect how confident buyers are feeling and impact the whole market.
You're hitting on a really important point. Lower borrowing costs are good, but those other economic things can really throw a wrench in the works.
Definitely.
If inflation keeps going up, the Bank of Canada might think twice about cutting rates again. And when more people are out of work, it's tougher to buy a house.
Right?
Plus, those tariffs. Nobody knows what's going to happen. That uncertainty affects the whole economy, which can trickle down to the housing market.
The report even says that those tariffs have made buyers more hesitant than expected. That's part of the reason sales were so slow at the beginning of the year.
Exactly. So lower interest rates are great, but all that uncertainty could mean we have to wait a bit longer for the market to really bounce back.
Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it?
Big time. What's happening in the world, trade deals, all that stuff, it really affects how people feel about buying and selling homes.
And speaking of feelings, what about buyer sentiment? What might happen next? Well, the report says all this trade uncertainty, plus the upcoming federal election, might make buyers want to wait and see what happens.
Makes sense.
And with more listings everywhere in the GTA, buyers have more power to negotiate.
It's true. When buyers have a lot of choices and the economy feels shaky, they're going to be more careful. And more inventory means they have more leverage for sure.
But TREB, the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, they seem kind of hopeful. They think if those trade issues calm down and borrowing costs keep going down, we could see things pick up in the second half of 2025. They also point out that detached homes in places like Leaside are holding steady, especially compared to the condo market, which has way too many listings right now.
It all lines up with what we're seeing. Detached homes in great neighborhoods, they're still in demand. The condo market, that's where the real trouble is. With all those extra listings, it seems like investors might be driving that too. So yeah, your detached home in Leaside is probably in a safer spot.
So, Tony and Marzana, let's sum it all up for you. What does it mean for your potential downsize? Well, these reports show that South Leaside is still a great area. The average selling prices for detached homes in Toronto Central are strong. That's a good sign for the value of a home.
Definitely. People want to live in your neighborhood, and that's a big plus. When you're ready to sell 151 Randolph, I think you'll get a lot of interest.
But remember, there are more listings popping up across the GTA. That means buyers have choices, and that could keep prices from jumping up too quickly. We might not see those crazy price increases we had in the past.
Yeah, it's good to be realistic. The demand is there, but the overall GTA market will have an effect. Buyers will be comparing different areas, so pricing your home right and making it stand out will be important.
Good point. Now, those potential interest rate cuts, that could make it easier for people to buy homes and maybe get more buyers into the market. That would be a good thing for you when you sell.
Totally. Lower borrowing costs help buyers get those mortgages, which could mean more offers for you.
Now, let's quickly go back to those updates Kaylee and Brad sent you. Remember back in November, they talked about 5 sales in Leaside, ranging from $2 to $4 million, and 11 active listings.
Right.
They also said we'd see more listings after the holidays, and that's exactly what happened, right?
Yep.
And even back then, everyone was talking about those historically low interest rates.
It's interesting to look back, isn't it?
It is. Back in October, they said inventory was going up, but sales were starting to balance things out a bit. And they thought the Bank of Canada might make some big rate cuts, which they've started doing now.
Back then, the market was finding its footing. More supply, but buyers were still interested, probably because they thought rates would go down, and they did.
Right. Then in September, the update talked about a jump in sales, even though more homes were coming on the market. They saw that as a sign that people were feeling better about things, probably because of those first rate cuts from the Bank of Canada. And in August and July, they kept you updated on sales and listings. Way back in May, they were already saying they thought the market would get better throughout the year. So things have definitely been changing, little by little.
Those updates from Kaylee and Brad really paint a clear picture. The market's been adjusting, trying to figure out what's going on with interest rates and how confident people are feeling.
So to wrap up our depth dive on those March market reports for you, Tony and Marzana, what does it all mean for your downsize?
Okay.
Well, South Leaside is still hot, and those strong average selling prices in Toronto Central prove it. That's good for your home's value. But the GTA in general has more homes for sale and prices are adjusting, so buyers have choices.
Yep.
Now, the economy is a bit shaky, especially with those tariffs, but those interest rate cuts, they can make a big difference. They could make it easier for people to buy and maybe even get more buyers into the market.
Absolutely. And that's good for you when you decide to sell.
And even though things are changing, that fact that your neighborhood is so desirable, that's a big plus for you.
For sure. The main thing for you, Tony and Mirzana, is that detached homes in South Leaside seem to be weathering the storm pretty well. It's going to be really important to keep an eye on what happens with the economy, those trade deals, and what the Bank of Canada does. All that will affect the market as you get closer to making your decision.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, Tony and Marzana, one last thing to think about. Given everything we've talked about today, what do you think will really appeal to buyers about 151 Randolph? What makes it special, and how can you showcase those things when you're ready to sell? We hope this deep dive has been helpful.
Absolutely.
And if you have any more questions or if you want to chat about your specific situation, don't hesitate to reach out.
We're here for you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.